work as well. And without any further ado, Riva Sweetrocket, an exceptional artist and a sweetheart.
Thanks, Greg. Well, thank you to everyone for being here today. I know it's a little challenging out there finding parking, and it's Labor Day weekend, and it really means so much to me that you made the effort to be here, and all of you are friends in some way, so thank you for that. You're going to have to excuse my notes. I can't find the bathroom in my own house without notes, so I might have to peek at this a little so I don't forget to say something. So I grew up in Boulder, and it's kind of a thrill to be here at the library, to be showing in Boulder, especially here because I remember being a little kid and 30 years ago coming to the library and spending a lot of time here way before they put the addition on, and so it really just kind of feels like coming home for me to be here. So it's a nice place to be. So as I said, I grew up in Boulder. I went to CU, and I didn't get a BFA though. I got a degree in psychology, but I did take several classes, art classes, while I was growing up, and several classes at CU too, but for the most part, I consider myself essentially self-taught, because most of what I've learned artistically has been just by farting around in the studio, trying different things, making mistakes, trying something else. And so that process has been really informative to me and a learning experience that still goes on every day. So that's kind of my educational background, or lack thereof, if you look at it that way. And I've been working in pastels now for about 10 years or so. And I'm really happy with the medium. There are certain qualities that pastel has that I haven't found in other mediums. And one of them is the way it reflects light. I think it has something to do with the fact that it's kind of a powder instead of a paint. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it's got this luminosity and the color just sort of glows, which I love. So that's one of the things that initially drew me to pastel. And another one of the things that I really like is the fact that I don't need to add water, I don't need to use a brush or anything extra, that I'm just, grab a pastel and I'm instantly going on a piece of paper. So it just has that immediacy, which I also love. But then there's also a downside to pastels, and if you've ever used them, you probably know this. They're extremely messy. So the dust just goes everywhere. I have to keep my studio door closed at all times because we have forced air heating, and you can just imagine where the stuff would go. So it gets airborne and it gets everywhere. So I constantly, whenever I'm working, I have to wear a respirator and gloves, and I'm covered from head to toe with old clothes and stuff. So I try to protect myself because I want to still be alive in 20 years, and breathing it can't be that good. And then the other, I guess, rather challenging thing about pastels is that they're very fragile. So even though I spray my paintings with fixative after I'm finished, they're still, fixative keeps the pastel from just lifting off the paper all on its own, when you sneeze or something. But it doesn't stop the pastel from, if you take your finger, you can still smear it. So it helps, but it really doesn't do that much to secure the pastel. So as soon as I finish a piece, I have to get it under glass pretty much immediately. I can't just leave things kind of sitting around. So that's sort of an extra concern. It's kind of a high maintenance medium, if you will, but I feel like it's worth it. It just has certain qualities that make all that trouble worth the fuss. So logistically, in my studio, I work directly on the wall. So I have two separate walls on which I have mounted a 6-foot by 8-foot piece of plexiglass. And then I buy paper on a roll, which comes 52 inches wide. And I just unroll the paper to however long I need it to be and tape it to the wall, which has worked out really well for me because since pastel is so messy, there's all this kind of junk that accumulates while I'm working. You know, eraser shards and pastel dust, and working vertically, all of that goes down. So it's out of my way. So it's been good for that reason. And then I built my frames from scratch myself, which has been, it's been good for a couple of reasons. One, I work so large. I mean, the pieces here aren't really super large for me, but my most comfortable size is probably this size and larger. So generally, framing a piece that size or having it professionally framed is just prohibitively expensive for me. At this point in my career, maybe when I get super famous, I can have somebody handle that. But, so it helps me to moderate that expense. And then the other thing about it is that it really allows me to modify the frames however I need in a given situation, to sort of tweak the design, create more space between the glass and the actual piece if I need to. So I have a lot of control over how the frames come out, and I can sort of build them however I need to. Well, and then reason number 3. Who doesn't love to use power tools? Nothing gets my blood pumping more than a little dirt under the fingernails and using a power sander. So, so that's always a thrill.
What kind of tools do you have?
I have a power miter saw. The big ones that have like a plate, and then power sander drills. What else do I have?
Do you build up your moldings for your frames, or is that like a stock molding?
No, actually, I do build them up from scratch. So I get it. Just generally, it's a 1x2 and a 1x3, and so I nail those two sides together. And then once I have those moldings, if you will, made, then I can miter the corners and assemble the sizes I need. So yeah, that's essentially how that goes. So what I really wanted to talk about today is how I get my ideas. And there's two parts to that. The first part is just generally where I get my ideas is from my own personal experience and my interest in the human journey, the human emotional experience and the journey of the mind and the spirit. These are things that have intrigued me for my whole life, and which is probably why I got a degree in psychology. That these are kind of things I think about, the bigger questions in life, and so that's generally speaking where my ideas come from. But more specifically, I have kind of a process that I work through that I use to arrive at specific imagery for pieces. So I thought I would talk a little bit about that. It usually starts with Well, as I go through life, I'll collect things that speak to me. So it might be an object, it might be something I see in a magazine that I would cut out, or if I have an idea, I might just jot it down on a piece of paper, stick it in my file. The other thing that I do a lot is I do a lot of photography. So it might be something that I see that I take a photograph of, and I have all those photos in a database on my computer. So all of these things comprise this sort of artistic database file that I have. And when it comes time to start a new painting, I'll go to the file and I'll pick out specific things that I feel like really speak to me at that moment. So it might be 5 or 10 different things that I'll just kind of flip through, and I'll think, oh, that's just intuitively something really kind of grabs me at the moment. And I'll set those things aside. So then if I don't have those things already scanned in, I'll go ahead and scan them if they're still in paper form onto my computer. And I do all my composing now on the computer because I think I've just found it's a really useful tool for me. I spent about 10 years in the graphic design field, just creating promotional materials for clients. And so using the software that I use, and now it's specifically Photoshop, it just comes really naturally for me because I use it every single day at work. And so it's easier for me than sketching. I'm actually kind of a horrible sketcher. So it's a great tool, and it allows me, if you've ever used Photoshop yourself, then you know that it has so much capability that I can change the colors of objects, I can move things around, I can change the size of things, flip things the opposite direction, and so it's just got this amazing versatility. And it allows me to try all kinds of different ideas without actually committing to anything, which is nice. I don't have to go through the trouble of doing them on canvas and then realizing, oh, whoops, I really don't like that. So I'll go through this process on the computer, and then eventually I'll arrive at something that I'm happy with. And usually that means that it meets a couple of different criteria. One is that it has to make sense to me visually. In other words, it has to, like when I look at the piece, irrespective of the subject matter, that I have to feel like the piece is balanced, that visually it's pleasing to my eye, that I feel like the elements are just sort of where they need to be. And then the other criteria is that I have to feel like it has some meaning, some deeper meaning, potentially a story behind it, or just more going on than just some interesting elements put together. So now once I feel that it's met these two criteria, I will settle on a design that I'm happy with. And then I'll print out what I call a mock-up. So normally it's only about this size, and then that'll be what I work from while I'm actually painting, you know, what I'm looking at and then painting. And I brought this today. This is kind of an oversized version of what I normally would work from. This is what I worked from to create this piece. And I'll pass this around in a second so you could really get a look at it. But then over on the side, I also included so you could kind of see how I got there. These are the 3 photographs that I'm incorporating to create this image. So on top I have this old jacket from the 80s. It's been in my closet forever. And I just liked the zipper, so I took a photograph of that. And then this is just a photo of some clouds in the sun. And And then this bird is something that I've kind of had in my file for a while, and it's been there, and it was an image that caught my eye at some point. So all of those images went together to create this. And believe me, I didn't just 1, 2, 3 arrive at this. There was a whole process. At one point I had a cityscape behind the bird and all kinds of other different things going on, and just didn't find anything that I really felt was connecting for me until I reached this composition and I finally decided on this. So I'll just pass this around so you can kind of take a peek. So that's essentially my process. And I guess the last thing that I wanted to say is that often people mention that they notice that I'm using pastel in a way that seems really different from other pastel artists that they've seen. And I guess that's true, and it wasn't a conscious decision that I made. It was more just, I gravitated toward the medium, and then once I was using pastel, I knew how I wanted it to look. And so I just set about the business of trying to get it to do what I wanted it to do. Not even really thinking about, is this even possible with pastel, or nobody's really done this before. And I managed to get pretty close to my opinion of what I had in mind, what I envisioned. So it wasn't a calculated change or diversion from the history of pastel painting. And then I guess the other thing that's somewhat different about my work is that I don't see that many other pastel artists working really large. Occasionally you do, but not that often in my comings and goings. And I think working large is just so much more appealing and kind of fulfilling for me. Things just seem more dramatic at large scale. I feel like I can actually get into the painting and be a part of it. And it's just easier to motivate myself working large. I just feel like I'm getting more bang for my buck. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. And then after that, I wanted to mention that in the back I have a guest book that if you want to sign that, and I can put you on my mailing list if you want to be informed of other events coming up. I have another show coming up in March of 2008, and I have an open studio in October. So those are things that I would let you know about. So feel free to sign that if you like. And then also there are some flyers about my upcoming open studio over there too, as well as greeting cards and anything else that you might, probably some chocolate back there somewhere. If you know who to talk to. I don't know.
When was the show in 2008?
It opens March 1st.
Okay.
So yeah, not that far away actually.
And where?
It'll be here. It's at Plus Gallery in Denver. So that's coming up soon. Actually, I should probably be working right now. Oh yeah.
How many hours do you spend in a week? Do you spend long days?
Well, yeah, that's a great question. Generally, I spend around 20 to 25 hours a week. Because pastel is, painting, maybe any type of painting, it's kind of exhausting. Especially working large, there's a lot of me climbing up on a step stool and I'm in these weird positions trying to get at something, or I'm squatting down, and it's physically exhausting. So I find that 5 hours a day is usually my maximum, and I have to take a lot of breaks in between. So
Do you go out for walks, or do you stay home?
I do go out for walks actually. Yeah, or I'll just have to pay bills, or something really mundane that has to get done in between those times. But yeah, and then actually a painting about this size takes me around 75 hours or so to complete, and then one this size is usually more like 40 or 45, something like that. So it kind of, you know, it can take a while to actually complete a piece, or yeah, depending on how you look at it. I guess, you know, the Earth took millions of years to. Julia?
How do you deal with storage of a lot of glass and big glass?
Well, for one thing, it's plexiglass, not glass. So, which is necessary at this size because actual glass would be very fragile, also very heavy. But as far as storage is concerned, I just stack them and I put like towels in between each one so they don't scratch each other, and then just stack them against the wall in our garage. Yeah, vertically, exactly. So, but you do need a little bit of storage space, for sure. Oh, yeah.
The plexi, it seems like you have static with plexi, and I'm just wondering, do you run into that issue where the pastel wants to jump onto the plexi, or do you not have that problem?
No, I definitely do, and that's what the fixative takes care of. For the most part, it'll take care of all of that. There's the occasional, you know, you didn't quite spray enough on and a little bit gets away, but generally that and the amount of space that I put between the plexiglass and the actual piece, which is usually between 3/4 of an inch and sometimes an inch on the really big pieces, those two things keep that under control. But you're right, the plexiglass has like a little static charge to it. It's really sneaky little.
And what type of paper do you use? You said it was in a roll. What type is that?
It's Arches cover, and I get it through Daniel Smith. I order it, and I think it comes 10 yards by 52 inches. But it's just great because you can just roll out, you know, a sidewalk full and go nuts if you want.
So you don't have to mount it on anything like a dry mount or anything to keep it so smooth? It has enough rigidity to stay flat like that?
I find that it does, yeah. I don't do any mounting. I just, you know, I have archival hinges behind it onto the backing inside there, and you know, and then when I tape it to the wall, I tape around the entire edge. So that helps. And then also unrolling the paper so it curls toward you and putting it on that way, as opposed to curling away from you. If you tape it that way, it'll sort of pudge off the board, and while you're working, it'll drive you insane, just in case you're thinking of trying this at home. Just keep that in mind.
Right.
Bill?
Do you transfer from your Photoshop image, do you use anything mechanical to transfer the image to the paper? I mean,
You mean other than my...
projectors and grids or things like that, or do you just eyeball?
Oh, I gotcha. Yeah, no, I definitely do project, because I figure why, you know, if I was good at translating an image, I would do that, but to be completely honest with you, I'd rather just have an ice cream cone than put myself through that. So yes, I do project, Phil.
So what do you use? I mean, do you take a slide, or do you just have like an opaque projector, or one of those real simple little light bulbs?
I have, what is it called? It transfers an actual printed image. So I guess maybe that's an opaque. I've forgotten the brand now, but
yeah.
You know, it's got a little screen that's about this big, and you just put your print out there, and it just zaps it onto whatever size.
Rita, do you blend colors, or do you have a pastel for every color? Or do you have to layer color to get what you want?
Well, it's easier if you have a pastel that's just the right color, I've found. Because they're a little fussy when you blend, but I do definitely blend, for sure. It's just, some colors blend more easily than others. Like, for instance, here where the clouds are sort of coming into the sky, that's a pretty easy blend. But then over here, for instance, where this yellow is transitioning into this blue, that was a nightmare. Just to get it to be kind of like a smooth transition and not sort of chunky. So some blending is fussier than other blending. But you know, it helps if you have the exact colors and you just do it that way. It's certainly easier.
Do you use brushes for blending or the stumps? Fingers?
And no, generally just my hands. Yeah, I wear latex gloves when I'm working, and I just do a lot of like really smearing with the palm, you know, for a sky, a lot of smearing, and it's all hand work. So, Anina?
Do you ever work on more than one at the same time? Drawing, painting?
Yes, I do. Generally, I have 2 pieces going at a time, and which is great because once it's easy to get stuck on a piece sometimes. You just work on it every day. Every once in a while, you just sort of either you burn out or you get hung up on some little thing that's driving you crazy. When that happens, I switch to the other piece, and when I come back again, I'm kind of refreshed and I'm just zooming along again, I find. So it's good to switch around. It helps. Yeah.
How about your lighting? What kind of lighting? The color is so sensitive to the lighting. Do you have incandescent lights and fluorescent lights in your studio, or just daylight? How do you work?
I have 2 sets of fluorescent lights above each board, and they're kind of facing in a little bit so that they project down. And I have full spectrum bulbs in those. So the light I'm getting, I think, is somewhat close to daylight. And I find it's and then actually I do have a window also, which helps, but it's still nice to have that extra light coming in for sure. Oh, Dan?
Have you ever started a work where you've got a certain idea, you're in a place emotionally, and you begin that work, and over the progression of the work, your emotions have changed, and so the work itself then changes as you progress on, or kind of like, you know, today I'm happy, but, you know, the clouds tomorrow could be thunderclouds, you never know, right? So, kind of like that.
Right, yes, definitely. That has certainly happened, and I find it most often happens when the subject matter is really close to me somehow. For instance, there have been a few pieces that I've done that have to do with family, or, you know, things that are just really emotionally kind of tied up with me emotionally. Those are just, can be really challenging because it becomes so much more than just the actual piece. It also kind of becomes the situation that you're in. And so yes, for sure, I've had to completely scrap pieces sometimes because it just, you know, I just couldn't follow through with it, so yes. Yeah, Liz?
Well, I think of pastels as being so unforgiving, you know, that with acrylics or just the medium I work in, I mean, you can just start over on the same, work on the same canvas, but work over it or scratch away and take away, and additive, subtractive processes. No, but that's not anything in your world, right? With pastels, it's just one shot and that's it.
Well, actually, no, not really.
No?
I mean, to an extent, yes, because the paper can only handle so much kind of fussing, but you can erase. You can definitely erase and do something different. So you could maybe erase a couple of times without being able to sort of tell that the paper had really been muddled with. And so there is some forgiveness. I mean, you couldn't just keep changing and changing and changing forever. It helps to kind of know pretty much what you're doing. But yeah, no, believe me, I do plenty of erasing. So it is possible. Oh, Julie?
How do you keep your right hand and your left hand cramps or fatigue in your right hand and have to shake it out? And what do you do with your left hand? And how does that work? For your body, your one body, two hands.
Yeah, that's a great, no one's ever asked that.
Are you ambidextrous?
I wish I was. No, I'm not ambidextrous, but no, that's an issue. This hand does get really cramped up. Well, or tired actually. There's certain muscles that get tired over time. But I discovered one thing by accident. I'm pretty much a vegetarian. But I discovered by eating more protein that a lot of that went away. So that was kind of an unexpected surprise. And then the other thing is just you get your spouse to massage your arm. That's the only other thing you can do.
I have a question about your detailing. When you work on a project, do you keep it all light all over and then put all of your darker detail in very last, or do you start like in a 1 square foot area and do it from light to dark with all the detail? What's your progress on that? Because they're so large.
Yeah. Well, actually, there is a definite process, and as it turns out, it's neither of those. What I do is I work back to front. So any part of the image that's in the very, very background, for instance, with this one, the sky, that would be the first thing I do. So first I do the sky, the sun, and I kind of leave this place blank where the bird is, and this whole thing. And then I'll do the shadow that's behind the zipper. And then I'll go back and I'll do the next level, which is the jacket, and this piece was just maddeningly tedious, to be honest with you. I had to make a special plastic stencil for the zipper teeth, but generally speaking, then I'll take an eraser and just kind of clear off the edge of an object that goes in front, and then paint that part, and at the very last, at the very end, paint the bird. So just kind of forward, forward, forward.
And your detailing is done with pastel pencils, sharpened?
Well, some of the very, very, very minute details. So even the teeth, those were done with the big chunky pastels too. Yeah, but with the stencils, that's kind of how I kept it contained in that little area. And the whole time I was cursing. Some things I paint, and I just think I'm never painting this particular thing again. But yes, but if it's a super, super tiny detail, the problem, I guess, with the pastel pencils I find is that maybe it's that they put more binder in the pencils so that they can stay a pencil and not fall apart. And I find that makes them less easy to blend. So once I get something on there, it's hard for me to really fully integrate it with the other things that are around it. So I try to use that only for really minuscule little, like maybe the bird feet over there, or some of the claws. So if it's just minuscule, I use the pencils. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Do you use a particular brand of pastels? And have you experimented with different types? And also, have you experimented with different types of paper?
Oh, yes. Well, yes to both. I'm using schminky pastels now because I like how soft they are. They're softer schminky. There are softer pastels and harder pastels, but Schminky isn't the only brand that makes a really soft pastel. There are others. And I haven't tried every brand out there. I just have been really happy with them, so I've kind of been going in that direction. And then with the paper, yes, I have tried other papers. And the thing with pastel is you really need a paper that has a lot of tooth to it. So, because that's what the pastel clings to. And by tooth, I mean it's like almost like a little fur sort of on the paper. And the Arches cover has a really nice, one of the two sides it just has this really nice surface that just grabs the pastel. You can erase it, and it does so much. So I've really been. And then the other thing, the other criteria that was big for me was how big do they make the paper. So there may be other papers that are really great, but they just don't produce them as large as I like to go. So then that's kind of out for me, at least.
But the paper you use is specifically made for pastels?
I think it's multimedia. I think they say pastel, charcoal, maybe even watercolor. I think it's more than just pastel, though. Yes. Oh yeah, Bill.
Georgia O'Keeffe always denied that there was any overt reference to a sexuality or genitalia in her work. I just wonder how you feel, regarding that to your own work.
Oh yeah. Are you seeing one that's specific?
There's other more things in some of the other ones as well. And knowing your work as I have, yeah, it does pop up from time to time.
Right.
That's reference to Warhol.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you asked that. Other people have said that before, especially about my earlier work, which was maybe a little more kind of suggestive. And it's never been anything that I've consciously thought about that, I'm going to add this sort of really seductive element here. But it might just be part of, I don't know, my personality or something in there that's maybe coming through that you're picking up on, Bill. I don't know.
So essentially you're throwing it back on the viewer, which is what I have a follow-up question.
Oh, yeah.
When that dog gets to the fortune cookie, and if the dog is able to open the cookie, will he be able to read the fortune himself, or will he need help?
Wow, that's, who knows? Who knows?
The shadow.
Yes.
Oh, well, that touches on something that hasn't come up, which is that you do always have legends with your pictures. That is little stories.
Oh, right.
And I actually find them very interesting. I feel right at home that you explain them because sometimes the paintings are hard to interpret, and then there's an interpretation, and then I can look at it and say, well, I see something else, so it helps your mental exercise that you present that. But but many artists don't do that.
That's true.
So it's unusual that you give an interpretation that is your own, a verbal interpretation.
Yes.
And I kind of wondered what led you to do that.
Well, I started out not including explanations of my pieces and thinking, well, it's nice when people bring their own experience to a piece and see whatever makes sense to them in the painting. And I didn't want to interfere with that, like impose on people this is what it is, and sort of dictate to them what it should be when maybe they were seeing something else that was more meaningful to them. But over the years, I started to notice that people were really asking me what I was thinking, or what is this piece about? And so slowly I discovered people were really kind of wondering what I was thinking. So I started including explanations, first on a separate sheet of paper, and then with this show, those of you who haven't actually seen the show, in the gallery don't know this, but each piece had next to it an explanation of what's going on in the piece, what I was thinking. So with this show, the explanations were right next to the piece. And I found that people really appreciated having that insight, that they can at least look at the piece themselves initially and have their own interpretation and then see what I was thinking. And that sometimes brought more to the piece for them to know what my thinking was behind it. So that's how I started doing it.
I'm glad you do that.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad you think so. Oh yeah, Anita?
Oh, we missed out on the show, unfortunately, and the captions, we were awake, but we would have been there. This is the point. This one behind you.
Yeah.
What comes to my mind? It's like the album cover of Sticky Fingers, or
oh yeah.
I mean, with a zipper, and there's a bird. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know what that meant, but.
I think she's asking whether or not it's influenced by pop culture.
Oh, right.
Or Rolling Stones, you know, album
Warhol.
cover, or Andy Warhol, that's right, he did do that.
You know, it wasn't influenced by that specific album cover that you're mentioning, no, but you know, the collective unconscious, there's all kinds of things out there, so
Yeah.
you know, so these images are around, so something I picked up on must have gotten in there. And that makes me also think that if you didn't see the show in the gallery, you can always go to my website. I have all of these pieces plus the couple that aren't in here today, and each one has the explanation next to it, or my thinking there. So you can always check there if you want to get the full picture on everything.
Okay,
So yeah,
thanks.
sure.
Yeah. What happens to these pieces when they leave this particular gallery? Do they go to another gallery, or
Well,
is
some
it a
of
place
the
where you show regularly?
oh
And do you
yeah.
have patrons, and do you people buy your work?
Yes, they definitely do. And some of the pieces are sold, so those will go to people's homes and whatnot. And then the other pieces will probably come back to my studio, and a few will go to Plus Gallery, who represents me in Denver. So they'll have a couple of pieces on hand. And then I guess the only other maybe opportunity to see the pieces and then other pieces that I have before my next show, which actually will be all new work, so it won't be these pieces or previous pieces, will be at my open studio. So I'll have a bunch of things there too if anyone wants to see more things. If you haven't had enough already. Yeah, Linda.
So as you're working on the new work for the Plus Gallery show in March 2008, will you hold those pieces back from the internet as well and just keep them under wraps until you bring them out?
Yes, I will. And I usually on my website, I have like a little sneak peek of just part of the painting, so you can sort of see a little bit of what it'll be, but not the whole piece won't be revealed right until the show.
Great.
Yeah, so
You want the first dibs, huh?
anticipation. Yeah. Well, thank you again so much for coming. It's just a joy to see all these wonderful faces here, and yeah, it's just thanks again.
Thank
It's
you.
great
Thank
to
you.
meet you.